Blog Talk Radio.
Franchise interviews from Easton, Pennsylvania to Sydney, Australia. You're listening to Franchise Interviews. Franchise Interviews. Welcome to Franchise Interviews. Franchise Interviews has been giving an up-close, behind-the-scenes look at franchising and entrepreneurship. Listen to interviews with franchisers, franchisees, franchise authors, franchise experts, and attorneys. And now, welcome your host, Marty McDermott, and Franchise Interviews.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to a very special edition of Franchise Interviews, where for over 11 years now, we've been asking the entrepreneurs of one-on-one. I'm your host, Marty McDermott. I'm the president of Franchise Interviews, and we have a great show today. We're meeting with Joe Giammona of the Drivers Training Group. And former Green Beret Joe Giammona has made it his mission to keep his community safe. Now, as the CEO of the Drivers Training Group, he runs the Drivers Training Group that employs off-duty or former police officers to teach drivers ed. We're going to talk to Joe about that in just a moment on Franchise Interviews. So stick around because we have a great show.
The Stone Coat Franchise Opportunity. Are you looking for a unique and lucrative franchise opportunity? If so, take a look at Stone Coat. With a patented process which creates a true stone finish on almost any wall or ceiling, Stone Coat is a true game-changing product in the multi-billion-dollar construction industry. Stone Coat is applied faster, cleaner, and cheaper than conventional quarried stone, which saves both time and money. With advantages in remodel and new construction of both residential and commercial projects, Stone Coat is a true crossover product. The Stone Coat franchise opportunity provides a low startup cost, low operating expenses, comprehensive training, ongoing support, and no royalty payments. For more information on the Stone Coat franchise opportunity, go to www.stonecoatfranchise.com. That's www.stonecoatfranchise.com, or call us at 972-380-2700. That's 972-380-2700.
Hi, this is Connie McDermott, Administrative Assistant for Franchise Interviews, LLC, and you're listening to Franchise Interviews.
Franchise Interviews from Easton, Pennsylvania to Sydney, Australia. You're listening to Franchise Interviews. Franchise Interviews.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to a very special edition of Franchise Interviews, where for over 11 years now, we've been asking the entrepreneurs one-on-one. I'm your host, Marty McDermott. I'm the president of Franchise Interviews, and as we were saying earlier, we have a great show today. We're meeting with Joe Giammona of the Drivers Training Group. The former Green Beret Joe Giammona has made it his mission to keep his community safe. And now, as the CEO of the Drivers Training Group, he runs the Drivers Training Group that employs off-duty or former police officers to teach drivers ed. Hi, Joe. How are you? Welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing fine, Joe. Thanks for coming on the show today. You know, I first read about you in Franchise Times magazine. I said, what a great article and what a great concept. We always like to ask our guests, where are you calling from today, Joe?
From Issaquah, Washington.
Oh, nice. How's the weather there today, Joe?
Well, it's a little overcast and rainy, but pretty much our norm.
Okay, that's fine. This was an interesting concept, Joe. I thought, maybe for this concept, we're going to have to kind of go back to the beginning, and maybe you could talk a little bit about the history of the Drivers Training Group and how this whole thing came about, because as I mentioned earlier, it's a really interesting concept.
Sure, yes. One of our owners was a hobby race car driver, and he had a coach that was a former Indy driver. And so as our owner was being coached, he started talking to his coach and said, hey, there's something here, because the technique of driving is the same from a personal automobile to an Indy car when you come down to the core fundamentals. So they said, and our owner being an entrepreneur is like, I think we can monetize something here, and there's a great need for good driver training. So they got together and started some focus groups with teens in the local community and parents about what they would like in driver training programs, and then started developing our brand overall from there.
That's great. How Are the laws different, Joe? Because I don't know a lot about, the industry. I remember just going back a long time ago, of course I went to driver's school and I don't even remember how expensive it was at the time. But, do the states vary, like, as far as, like, cost or, how many hours you have to drive on the road?
That's correct. They're basically all different, which is the problem
Wow.
here in the U.S.
Right.
We got to remember only about 30 states require driver's education. The others can be self-taught, or you just take a test and get a license. So yes, that's been an issue in franchising, that you have to customize curriculum based on every state's individual requirements.
It's amazing. I think that was something I was really surprised about. I remember when I read the article when you were interviewed in Franchise Times, and I said, God, self-taught. I said, it doesn't make sense because, it seems so dangerous. You know what I mean? It's not like learning a musical instrument or something like that, or, a computer program, So I was really surprised, and I said, this makes sense. I mean, here you are. You're really satisfying, I think, a huge need here in the United States. When you're meeting with someone for the first time, Joe, like a prospective franchisee, like if you were at a franchise show and someone came up to your booth, how do you typically describe the Drivers Training Group franchise to, let's say, a prospective franchisee?
Yeah, we just say, we're a young growth company looking for people that are passionate about, changing lives. I'll be honest, this isn't an industry that you're going to get extremely high growth. It's heavily regulated. So we need owners that are really passionate about making a difference in people's lives. And it's not all about profits. That's a big part of it. Right. But there definitely has to be a counterbalance of passion towards just helping others, wanting to improve our communities and our society overall. So we really look for that, and we screen very heavily on that point.
Who came up with the idea, Joe? Because I thought it was very clever, because I know the Drivers Training Group, they employ off-duty former police officers, to teach drivers that, and it makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? But I thought it was a very clever idea. How's that working out so far?
No, it works out great, and we have active duty police officers also. So the main mantra of our brand is knowledge, experience, and trust. And that kind of sums up what you have for law enforcement and EMS, because our programs are all about experiential. So we can have an officer be in front of a classroom and say, here's a concept, and last night when I responded to this call, this is what I saw. So you bring kind of the real world into more of a textbook setting, and it becomes very experiential, just where the kids just aren't reading those slides. It's very collaborative, very interactive.
It seems like officers would be a good match too, with the organization as well for the Drivers Training Group, Joe. From, of course, having all that experience, of course, of being an officer, and I know officers sometimes, they retire a little bit earlier sometimes than the average person. They put in their, I guess it's 25 years, and there's a lot of people out there, that can kind of fit that role. So, I thought the whole thing was really very clever. As far as the industry goes, you mentioned a little bit about it, but I guess, it's safe to say that this is a pretty big industry, right, Joe? And it's just people constantly want to learn to drive or should learn to drive. So I imagine it's just safe to say that it's a pretty big industry, isn't it?
That's correct, and it's a multi-channel industry where you have the novice driver, teen driver, you have adult drivers, and then you can get into the commercial side. And we also do, post certificate like law enforcement training, and once they get certified by Washington State Patrol, we can do follow-up training with them. So overall, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, which makes it very nice and attractive to potential franchisees.
Of course, absolutely. Has there been anything interesting that's happened to you, since working with the organization, Joe? Anything, stand out? Any surprises, since you've been with the organization?
Oh, yeah. So we started out as a competitor of the 911 Driving School brand. Yeah. So the Driving Training Group had its own brand named SWERVE Driving School. Right. And so we were friendly competitors. So we didn't start the 911 brand, but obviously we followed it, and it was my job to reverse engineer the numbers to understand their growth rates, what they were doing, how they were doing, their courses. So I became friends with the owners, and then over time, we evolved and where we had discussions just of acquiring their brand. But we weren't involved in franchising prior to that. So one of the most interesting things was learning pretty rapid fire is the franchise model, why we'd want to switch to a franchise model, then how to move a franchise model, into the future and be successful at doing that.
Right. Has your military played a background, or has it been helpful, Joe? I actually, for my dissertation, for my doctorate degree, I actually studied the link between military or ex-military and job satisfaction. In other words, I found that in doing this research, I did it for about 3 years, that individuals that have a military background typically enjoy running a franchise than somebody who may have never served in the military before. Has it had do you have this appreciation for franchising by having this military background?
I don't know if it's directly linked to franchising, but I can say I used a lot of my military experience and just what I do in business, throughout my entire career once I was out. There's a lot of core fundamentals that you learn in the service, and then some specialized courses I went through. They subject you to stuff that you just don't get in business. So when you have business problem situations, you can pretty much sit down and understand how to break them down, rebuild them, and then have a plan to move forward. So I do use a lot of my military experience in daily operations. And for the franchising side, it's just managing larger groups. So we have, for us, we're a small franchisor. We have 31 groups, but in a very regulated and technical industry. And I believe a lot of that training that I had in the service prepared me to be able to handle not only, buying a franchise corporation, but grow it and run it successfully in the future.
That's terrific. When you're meeting with a prospective franchisee, Joe, because I imagine you get to meet with a lot of them, are there any types of characteristics that you look for in a prospective franchisee that you think would be a good match for the Drivers Training Group?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, a lot is passion. I come from the old school where if you have passion, we can train. Right. And again, that may be some of the military experience. But yeah, we definitely, and when we were working with, you don't have to be a former police officer or EMS operator to be an owner. But a lot of characteristics that those professions have, we look for. Be able to work under pressure, think methodically, manage people, even manage customers. That ultimately, again, is have that passion to change people's lives and be involved in that process and really care about it.
That's great. What is the training like, Joe? I mean, once you decide, that you do indeed like them and they like you and they do want to come on board as a franchisee, do they typically come out to Washington then for training? Is that how it works?
We have two different ways. We can come out on site to where our new franchisee is, or they can come out here to Washington. We do have to do a lot of technical training, and since the majority of our franchise system is here in Washington State, it's just easier to do a lot of the behind-the-wheel training that we have to do, the technical skill training. But we also do administrative, finance training, all those other trainings that can be done at their home office or ours.
That's great. For our listeners, Joe, I mean, maybe you could talk a little bit about, what a typical day is like for a Drivers Training Group franchisee, if there is such a thing as a typical day. I'm sure every day is a little bit different.
Right. No, I think that's kind of the excitement of it. It's pretty different. A typical owner, because we have different owners. Some owners aren't directly involved in the business, but let's take one that is. We have automated systems where they're managing schedules. They have staffs. We have mostly brick and mortar facilities, so they pretty much come to the facility and just handle a lot of the instructor side, since it's so technical, and all of our owners are certified instructors. So they do a lot of just management of staff, get everyone going, and then of course, like everything, we have vehicle maintenance and management, customer management, and then employee management. But every day, just brings you different highlights and things that you may focus on. But ultimately, you're going to be in a classroom teaching teens, and you're going to be behind the car is a big portion of their day.
That's great. You've been doing this a lot longer than our listeners have, Joe. We call our listeners to our show aspiring franchipreneurs. A lot of them, they want to get into franchising, but there's so much out there today. A lot of them we find they just simply don't know where to begin. What advice would you give to our listeners, from everything that you've learned since doing this, in their quest to buy a franchise?
Right. Yeah. No, be a student first.
Right.
Right.
I like that.
So what I did is I read a lot of books. I talked and networked with a lot of people that I knew that were in franchising. But you have to study. What I found is a lot of people go, I have a good concept, I'm just going to franchise it. And they don't understand what it takes to be a successful franchisor.
Mm-hmm.
And that you need operational systems, you need programs, platforms. And I think that's where a lot fail, is they don't do all of the homework. You got to set a foundation first and then build on top of your foundation. So I guess that's what I learned pretty rapid fire through reading, studying, and talking to others. But then a lot is experiential. It's just learn and grow. But definitely prepare yourself. And it's not as glamorous and easy as it may be portrayed. A lot of people think I'm going to get into franchising, I'm going to make $1 billion in a year, and we're good to go. I mean, you have a 1% conversion rate. There's hurdles. So just be real, educate yourself, and then execute.
Yeah, I like how you said that, Joe. I've been asking that question for almost 12 years now, and I've never heard that before, as you mentioned, to become a student, and I think that's so important, because you are kind of like shifting roles to some extent. A lot of these people are coming from corporate America, and they're used to, I guess, sometimes being a boss, and I guess you do have to have that, openness to learning, don't you, when you're becoming a franchisee.
Well, that's correct, and it's both sides. As a franchisor, you manage differently. When our SWERVE brand, we had 150 people at our height, and you manage direct employees different than you manage franchisees, and the relationship's different because, yes, we have a franchise agreement that's fairly, regulates what they can and can't do to a certain point, but they're also their own individual business, and we can't cross a line. I had to change my management style from our own employees to having franchisees, which they aren't employees, but you manage them, same pretty much, to a certain point. But they are their own companies, and I think a lot of people forget that when they have franchisees, bring it on. They think they can just dictate and tell them what to do, and again, some things you can based on the franchise agreement, but a lot of things you cannot. And you also have to be an educator for them and teach them. For us, a lot of police officers don't have a lot of business experience.
That's true.
And aren't franchisees. So we not only have to educate what our role is, but educate them on their roles. And that's part of our management training, is that we will talk to them about, here's corporate structures, here's how to be a manager, here's the people that you need in your organization to be successful.
That's fantastic. As a CEO, I can ask you the next question, Joe. I mean, where do you see the Drivers Training Group, maybe, if you can look to a crystal ball, maybe 3 to 5 years down the road, where do you see the organization?
Yeah, what we've done and what we're focusing on is internal growth of our current franchisees. So I see us being a very strong, a very dominant driving school brand that's going to be very progressive where we can, and we're going to start using technology when we can. Again, we're regulated, so we get handcuffed a little per se on how advanced we can be. But like anything, look at when you and I took driver's education, it's evolved a lot. Vehicles evolved a lot. Laws.
True.
So we're always going to be on the forefront. That's the one mission I give our staff and our company is we're going to be progressive. We're going to be in front of the technology, vehicle changes, all those changes. But with our company itself, we aren't in a massive growth position. We're really going to focus on growing same-store sales through additional market share in the markets we're in. And then also we look at adding a lot of, complementary products to our franchisees so they have more to sell than just driver's education. We want to really leverage the law enforcement side and EMS side and then go, what else can we add to the franchise brand that is complementary to those professions? Right.
That's very clever. What's the best way for our listeners, Joe, to get more information on the Drivers Training Group as a service and, of course, the franchise itself? Are there any websites you'd like them to go to or check out?
Sure. It's www.911drivingschools.com. and that's
Okay.
our main page, and then you can go to the franchising tab from there.
That's fantastic. And I want to thank you again for coming on the show, Joe. I was really excited to interview you, and also thank you for protecting and serving our country for many years and coming up, working with this concept, because I think it's really fantastic. And as you grow it, I'd like to invite you back over the next year or so and see how you guys are doing.
Oh, that'd be great. Thank you very much for the opportunity to come on your show.
This has been my pleasure, Joe. And we'll be right back with more franchise interviews. Coming up on segment 2, you're going to hear what every franchipreneur needs to know before buying a franchise. We're going to play a clip from our popular Great Quotes in Franchising podcast right here on Franchise Interviews.
Are you looking for a franchise that delivers? Businesses will always need shipping, and for more than 25 years, loyal customers have depended on Unishippers for reliable savings and exceptional customer service. Unishippers is focused on just one thing: helping small and medium-sized businesses save time and money on all their shipping needs. And as the largest reseller of complete shipping services in the country, we have the buying power to ensure that we succeed. The Unishippers franchise offers low startup costs, no equipment or real estate required because they're not retail, residual income, and a quality of life and work-life balance. For more information on becoming a Unishippers franchisee, go to www.unishippers.com and click Franchise Opportunities, or call Franchise Development at 801-708-5822. That's 801-708-5822. Franchisers, are you looking to reach aspiring entrepreneurs looking to buy a franchise? Are you looking to reach a highly educated audience on franchising? For over 8 years, Franchise Interviews has been giving an up-close, behind-the-scenes look at franchising and entrepreneurship through our website, franchiseinterviews.com, where you can hear and read interviews as well as get tips from some of the most successful sources in franchising. Our weekly franchise radio show, where each week you get to hear a new interview with franchisers, franchisees, franchise authors, franchise experts, and attorneys, and our podcast, Great Quotes in Franchising. For more information, go to franchiseinterviews.com or call us at 610-905-2919. That's 610-905-2919.
Today's Great Quote in Franchising is being brought to you by
Franchise Teacher.
Would you like to know how to franchise your concept or grow your franchise business?
Meet the experts at Franchise Teacher.
The goal of Franchise Teacher is to teach, coach, consult, and advise. The team of experts at Franchise Teacher will evaluate your business model and present you with a winning business strategy.
Franchise Teacher will help you decide whether or not your concept works and if it's franchisable. Franchise Teacher is proud to have over 30 years of experience in franchising as both franchisees and franchisors.
Franchise Teacher are developers of over a dozen franchise systems, which include brick and mortar as well as home-based concepts of nearly 3,000 combined franchise locations.
Whether you need to add more units or get more customers, Franchise Teacher can help. We will teach.
Franchise Teacher will help you learn our proven system.
Coach.
Franchise Teacher will help you provide a game plan to succeed.
Consult.
Franchise Teacher will make sure you stay on track.
And advise.
Franchise Teacher will help you learn from our over 30 years of experience in franchising as both franchisees and franchisors. Take advantage of our free, no-obligation phone consultation. Simply go to franchiseteacher.com or call us at 561-385-3032.
That's franchiseteacher.com. Or call us at 561-385-3032.
Hi, everyone. This is Marty McDermott, the president of Franchise Interviews, and welcome to another edition of Great Quotes in Franchising, where each podcast you get to hear a great quote in franchising. We've been hosting franchise interviews many years now, and during that time, we've had some incredible quotes and lessons on our show. And if you go to our About Us page on franchiseinterviews.com, you'll take notice on why we started the podcast and radio show, Franchise Interviews. And it suggests that every business has a story. And that's really been our experience in doing all of these podcasts and radio shows. Is every show we do, you'll notice that every franchisor, every franchisee has an amazing story related to franchising. Today's Great Quote in Franchising podcast comes from Tony Luffy. And Tony Luffy is the Chief Executive Officer of the Marlowe Investment Group. And the Marlowe Investment Group are franchise owners of some very popular franchise systems such as Little Caesars, Sizzler, Jack in the Box, Arby's, Church's Chicken, and most recently Sears Appliance and Hardware stores. And Tony talks about the difference between opportunity and regret. There's another great quote relating to opportunity. And again, we talk a lot about opportunity on our weekly radio show. It's said that luck is when opportunity meets preparation. But let's hear what Tony says about the difference between opportunity and regret.
That we've been able to do on a large scale.
It's amazing. If you go back to the beginning, Tony, I mean, were your goals, I mean, today, I mean, you're as large as like 200 plus units, but I mean, back then, I mean, when you go back to the beginning, I mean, was that your goal in the beginning, or was this kind of like just like a natural progression over time?
It's both. Really, when I, in the early 90s, when I finally became a partner, a 10% partner of a small company, I wanted to get to 50 units before I turned 50. So I don't know if that goal was really feasible in my head, but that was the dream. But the goal, the most important part of it was I wanted to be an entrepreneur, I wanted to be independent, and I wanted to allow my ability to manage people and work with people to develop into something that was bigger. I didn't know the size, nor did I plan for it to be a number of revenue, whether it's 10 million or 5 million, whatever it was.
Right,
it was really finding a way to make a living and support my family, at the same time satisfying my personal need, which is to be an entrepreneur. And really, once that took place, it was more about the opportunities that came our way. And I always say the difference between opportunity and regret is being ready. So if you're ready, you see the opportunity as an opportunity. Otherwise, you spend a lifetime regretting the fact that you missed the opportunity. So to me, it's about being ready. And I've always worked so hard to make sure that we are ready for whenever that opportunity came our way.
That's fantastic. We have this Great Quotes in Franchising podcast. We're gonna put that quote in there, Tony, if you don't mind. I think that's very powerful. Maybe we could talk a little bit about your company. I mean, the Marlowe Investment Group. I mean,
if you'd like to hear that whole interview with Tony Luffy, all you have to do is go to franchiseinterviews.com, and you can go to our franchises listed alphabetically page and simply go to the Marlowe Investment Group, and you can hear that whole interview. We have that interview also in our About Us page, and you can go to franchise interviews by category as well and go under the food category, because that's where most of Tony's franchises are located within his portfolio. And lastly, we'd just like to thank everyone for making this podcast such a tremendous success. It's amazing how many people have listened to the podcast over the years, so it's really been wonderful, and we'll see you again soon with another edition of Great Quotes in Franchising from Franchise Interviews. Take care, everyone.
Franchise Interviews. From Easton, Pennsylvania to Sydney, Australia, you're listening to Franchise Interviews. Franchise Interviews.